Hey there folks, Toby here. In this video I'm going to walk you through Pure Strings, the new app for iOS by E-Instruments. And this brings desktop quality string samples to your iOS device. We'll demo all of the sounds and I'll show you all the features you need to get up and running with this new release. So without any further ado, let's jump in and take a look. So here we are in Pure Strings. Pure Strings provides you with 9 string sounds that cover a range of essential techniques from a full range acoustic string section, plus the addition of some popular synth string sounds. So it has a very intuitive interface that easily lets you select or blend between the various articulations provided using this central Morphpad. All of the acoustic strings are sampled using multi-layered dynamics. So when you use the dynamic slider here on the right, you're actually cross-fading through these dynamic layers and not just turning the volume up and down of a single sample. And this is going to give you a level of realism that you would expect to find in a desktop sample library. So let's dive straight in and have a listen to some examples. So let's start with the center position longs, or the pure setting, and here's how they sound. So you can hear that's a really fantastic ensemble patch there, very dynamic and detailed. Now we can add an extra dimension to this patch by going to the global instrument parameters on the left, selecting the tuning page, and here you'll find the Consordino button. Now if we activate this, it'll simulate the sound you get when players put mutes on the instruments, and it gives you a very silky, mellow tone. So let's hear that passage again on the longs with Consordino on. So a much softer sound there due to the high-end filtering. So it should be noted that the Consordino option is global for all of the sounds in Pure Strings. So you can experiment with that at your own leisure. So let's deactivate that now and move on to the tape setting. So this set of samples has been recorded to tape and then slowed down to half speed. This gives you a really nice stretched out lo-fi sound that's great for blending with other sounds as it plays back an octave down. So that's the tape. So next we have the ensemble tremolo articulation. So very nice dynamic tremolo sound there, great for all those suspenseful moments. So moving on now, we have the trills articulation. And impossible not to like that. So next up, let's hear the harmonics. Now the harmonics are interesting in that up high you get this really icy tone. And in the lower registers you get this almost like woodwind-like tone. So again, a very useful articulation, as in contrast to the tape sound, these samples sound an octave up, which again makes them really useful as a blend layer. So now let's check out the ensemble short articulations. Now by default, the short articulations are triggered by the built-in arpeggiator, and you can see the arpeggiator switch below the dynamic slider here on the right. Now this is on by default purely to give the shorts a chance to be heard when fading from a long articulation. For this example though, I'm going to disable the arpeggiator so we can get a sense of what the shorts are about when played as a regular patch. So here are the pizzicatos. So really great dynamic pizzicato sample there. So now it's probably a good time to mention that both keyboard velocity and the dynamic slider work in tandem with each other. Now, I found you get the best velocity response with a dynamic slider at about the halfway point. And as you move the dynamic slider up and down, it'll bias the velocity input to that slider position. Now, this is applicable to all the sounds in pure strings, obviously with and without the arpeggiator on, and it's just something that's good to know. So let's move on to the last of the shorts, which are the staccatos. So there you have a really useful quality staccato sound, which is great for ostinato passages or accented stabs, and you can't really argue with those. So now let's have a listen to the analog synth side of things. First up we get the string machine. So great retro sound there, captured superbly in all its 70s glory. And this is great on its own or as a blend layer. And lastly, we have the synth setting. So pretty epic synth string patch there. And I believe that was sampled from a Moog. Now, I've mentioned that you can blend these sounds together, so let's just have a look at some quick examples. You can use the Morphpad to actually blend up to 3 sounds together, but let's start with like a dual blend. So I can start at the center position and then just move down towards the tape until I get the blend I like. Or I could do a similar thing with the harmonics. So that's 2 sounds. So maybe now I can blend in the staccatos with this as well, giving me a 3 sound combination. And you'll hear I have the arpeggiator enabled for my shorts. And by that I obviously mean short articulations. So what if I wanted to blend the staccatos with the pizzicatos? Well, I can't currently do this as the synth is located between these 2 sounds. Well, this is where the edit page comes in handy. Now you'll find this on the right hand side, and if we enter edit mode, we now have the option to move our sounds to any location that we want. So now I can just move the staccatos next to the pizzicatos, and now I could blend between them. You may have noticed that the arpeggiator settings are also in the edit page on the right. You have selections for different timing values, and also controls for direction like up and down, or as played. The edit page's main function though is that it enables you to play sounds to facilitate any kind of blend you like. So let's take our synth example from earlier and use the pure strings and the tremolos to enhance it. So let's move the tremolos up next to the synth so we have easy access to it, and let's try it out. So you can see how easy it is to create these expressive blends in pure strings. Now doing these kind of morphs in a desktop setting would actually be a little bit of a pain, whereas in the iOS environment it's really quite trivial, and this is what makes pure strings and piano for that matter so powerful and creative. So now we've heard some sounds, let's take a quick tour of some of the other features in pure strings. So let's start with connectivity. Now for all the previous demos I've done, I've actually had the iPad connected to my Mac via IDAM, which is inter-device audio and MIDI. And this allows me to send MIDI from the Mac to pure strings on the iPad and actually record the results as audio in Logic Pro, just for the purposes of this recording. And you can see this here in the audio MIDI settings, which is over on the bottom left. And you can see that IDAM is present here in the audio MIDI settings. And you also have other parameters here, like you can change the master clock, etc. Now, I actually think this is a good example of how you can use the iOS experience in a desktop music production environment. And I think it's really good to think of your iPad or iPhone as like an external hardware synth that has all the benefits of these amazing apps and also the touchscreen interface. It also saves you having to listen to me futz about on the keyboard on the iPad screen, but if you wish to play pure strings from the iPad, you can activate the built-in keyboard using the button on the bottom right. And here you have a sustain switch, as well as an octave up and down control using the octave switch. You can, of course, use a MIDI controller with pure strings connected directly to your iPad over Bluetooth or USB. And if I magically switch things up here, you can see that I now have a hardware keyboard connected to the iPad, and I also have the option to choose any available MIDI ports. So speaking of hardware control, both the dynamic slider and the Morphpad can be controlled via MIDI CC. The dynamic slider is controlled by CC1 or mob wheel. The horizontal plane of the Morphpad is on CC14 and the vertical is on CC15. So you can easily move around the Morphpad using a hardware controller. And this could be useful for recording into GarageBand on the iPad or Logic Pro on the iPad. And you can of course use pure strings in any host, including Cubasis or AUM. So moving on, let's take a look at the global instrument settings quickly. We have 3 pages on the right. First is velocity control, and here you can change the response curve to suit your playing style. Second is the tuning page, and we have global controls for master tuning, transpose, stretched or equal temperament, and also the Consordino button we saw earlier. Lastly, we have settings for the global envelope and the master output. You'll also find a help dialog in the top right, which is handy to have. So the last page we'll look at is the effects page. We have 3 effects available: an EQ, a high quality reverb, and a delay. At the top you'll see a control by Morphpad switch for each of these effects. Now, when this is engaged, the effect settings are optimized and baked in for each of the 9 sounds, and will actually change parameters as you move around the Morphpad to coincide with those sounds. Now, by disabling the control by Morphpad for any of the effects turns them into a global effect, which affects all of the sounds and isn't influenced by the Morphpad. So an example of this is if I just play the pure strings patch, you can hear the reverb is fairly short there. So if I want a longer reverb on this pure strings sound, I'm going to go into the effects, go into the reverb, and I'll disable the control by Morphpad. And now I can change these settings up. And now I have this obviously longer reverb. And if I move to the staccatos, you'll hear the reverb is the same for those as well. And this scenario obviously applies to the EQ and the delay. So let's say I like this, I can easily save this to a preset by going to the presets page, hitting the plus icon, and saving this as, let's say, more is more reverb. And now I can record this for later use. There are of course a number of supplied presets from eInstruments for you to play with, so feel free to check those out. So that about wraps things up for this walkthrough, and I think eInstruments have done a really great job bringing some beautiful string sounds to iOS with pure strings. So go check it out at the App Store. That's all from me, and I'll see you later.